One cold winter evening, a certain 16-year-old girl was home alone watching television. Her parents were away on holiday at a friend's house. It had been snowing thickly all day, but the girl felt nice and cozy, sitting on the couch in the living room, wrapped up in a warm wool blanket. By midnight her parents had not yet returned, and she began to feel anxious. She didn't want to call them, lest they think she couldn't take care of herself. The TV was in the corner of the room next to the big window. She was watching another movie when suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something moving in the window. In the darkness, among the falling snow, she could make out the figure of a man walking toward her. As he approached, she could make out his face. It was covered with scars and his lips were stretched out in a sinister smile. Frightened, the girl froze, not daring to move. The man stood there, staring at her silently through the glass. Then he suddenly put his hand into his coat pocket and pulled something out. It was a knife. Unable to stand it, the girl grabbed the phone from the table by the sofa, dialed the number of the police and held her breath waiting for an answer. "There's a man standing outside my window," she whispered, keeping her eyes on the creepy visitor. "He has a knife. Please come quickly." "My address." She sat motionless, the minutes passed one by one. The man behind the window still stood staring straight at her. Finally, she heard a siren outside, and the police began knocking on the door. The girl rushed to the front door, letting the police officers in. They told her they hadn't seen anyone near the house and found no sign of anyone. "It can't be," the girl said, pointing to the window. "He was just standing there when you knocked. You couldn't have missed him." "That's impossible," said the officer. "No one was there. And the snow was untouched. In this snow, even if someone had been there recently, he would have left clear footprints." "But I saw him with my own eyes," insisted the girl. "You know, your eyes can play a cruel trick on you," grinned the officer. "Maybe you watch too many movies." The policemen were about to leave when suddenly one of the officers noticed something amiss. He frowned and walked around the couch where the girl was sitting. There were wet footprints on the carpet behind the couch and a dropped knife. "You didn't see the man outside the window," the officer said. "You were looking at his reflection. The whole time he was standing 2 steps behind you." Two disasters happened in the same yard at once. 2 children died out of the blue in the kindergarten. A boy and a girl. 2 perfectly healthy children simply did not wake up after an afternoon nap. An ambulance came. The doctor stated they were dead. They took something for analysis. Of course the police came, everyone was running, the director was shaking, nannies were hysterical. The children's parents lived in the same house, but in different entrances. Of course, it was a shock for everyone. The city was small, and everyone was shocked by the situation. And most importantly, the doctors could not say at once what the children had died of. The bodies of the children were taken home by their parents to be washed and prepared for burial. As they died in the afternoon, the funeral was scheduled for the next day morning. All the relatives, neighbors, and practically the whole city came. All helped in every way they could. In the evening they washed the bodies of the children, covered them with white covers, because tradition dictated that we mustn't look at the bodies after the washing and, having made all the arrangements, they left them till morning. In the morning, the unbelievable happened. The doctor, who had come in an ambulance to confirm the death, rushed to one of the apartments in which the grief occurred. He was in a terrible state, as if he had not slept all night, with frightened eyes. He knocked on the door and, when it was opened, tried to break into the room where the dead girl's body was lying. The relatives detained him and started asking him what happened. He started talking to be allowed to look at the body again. His speech was confused and incoherent. He said something about a mistake made by the doctor, that he had to make sure and so on. The mother became hysterical. The relatives tried to send the mad doctor away, but he fell on his knees and begged them that he would not even look at the body. Just take his hand out from under a white sheet, saying that without looking, I would only make a small cut on the palm, that it would be enough. But the girl's father stepped forward and said that after the ablutions he would not allow anyone to desecrate his daughter's body, and if the doctor did not leave now, he would simply throw him down the stairs. The relatives pushed the doctor out the door. And the men went downstairs with him to make sure he was gone. As they said, the doctor went outside and immediately grabbed his head and rushed to another entranceway where the boy's family was preparing to bury him. There, according to witnesses, the same scene happened. But with one difference, the boy's parents, apparently ready to grasp at any hope, allowed him to approach the body. The doctor came to the table where the boy was lying, took his arm and made a small but deep incision with a scalpel. Immediately blood trickled from the wound. When the doctor saw this, he immediately began shouting for an ambulance to be called, that the child was alive and could still be saved. He yelled for someone to run to another entranceway, to stop the funeral, that there was a chance the girl was alive too. An ambulance arrived. The boy was taken to the hospital. They did not have time to warn the other family, because when the relative arrived, they had already left for the cemetery. He took a cab, but he did not have time. When he arrived, the girl's body had already been buried. The girl's parents wouldn't agree to dig up the body for fear it would desecrate her. When those who accompanied the girl to the cemetery for her last journey returned to the yard for the funeral service, they saw an ambulance carrying a crying boy in the arms of his happy parents. He was crying and complaining that his cut hand hurt a lot. The chief doctor of the hospital where the boy came to life applied to the police to exhume the girl. It was not until the next day that permission was obtained through higher authorities. When the grave was dug up, everyone was amazed. Even grown-up men, cemetery staff who had seen a lot, stood and cried. The girl's body was twisted in an unnatural position. The white bedspread was torn in some places, her mouth was open and completely filled with sand. It was obvious that when she woke up, she was struggling for her life, but under the weight of the sand she had simply suffocated. What is the mystery? You may ask. And the fact is that on that terrible day at night the doctor dreamt of a little girl. She stood as if alive, although he had never seen her alive. In the dream she was beating him and trying to wake him up, saying, "Uncle, why did you bury me? Uncle, why did you bury me?" The doctor left the hospital for good and never treated again. He could never forgive himself for not saving the girl, though he guessed that he could have saved the boy. The old woman in the window. It was in Soviet times. An old woman lived in the house where it all happened. On Friday night of the 13th, the 90-year-old woman died in terrible agony. She bequeathed her house to her 20-year-old great-granddaughter, with the condition that she accept her abilities. Soon after her great-grandmother's death, the young heiress and her family moved into the house. After moving in, the granddaughter never accepted the witch's powers. On the 40th day after the witch's death, tragedy struck. One day, a neighbor who lived across the street came to meet her new neighbors. She knocked for a long time, but no one opened her door. As soon as the woman was ready to leave, the door opened, she entered, but there was no one in the house. This repeated itself for several days. The neighbor realized that the family was missing. The disappearance of the family forced the entire village to go looking for them. But after a week of fruitless searching, they decided to stop. In the silence of the night, she heard strange noises. The woman went to the window and saw an incomprehensible silhouette climbing into the house of the missing family. The frightened neighbor ran outside. A strange figure flew out of the window. Shocked, the woman ran into the empty house. Upon entering, she saw 3 horribly mutilated corpses. All 3, husband, wife, granddaughter, child, had their eyes gouged out and the name of their great-grandmother was written in blood on all the mirrors hanging in the house. The whole family was buried together. After the funeral, A neighbor went into the sinister house out of habit. She saw the old woman again, staring at her point blank. People heard the heartbreaking screams from that house, but no one dared to go there. No one ever saw this old woman again. Translated with www.deepl.com/translator, free version.